Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Then check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something to inspire you. That's dealtohealteas.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.com. Again, that's dealtohealteas.com. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you'll enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is healed, whole, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you guys subscribe to our new YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube. We originally was a single podcast, but now we decided to up the ante and offer you guys more podcasts. So on the Deal to Heal with the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, you will find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, and the Earn and Herb podcast, and the Faith Walk and Love Talk podcast, which is a Bible study podcast. So make sure you guys go and check out all of those podcasts on the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube. Also, make sure you guys check out our partner podcast, which is the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with E. James, who is myself. And on that podcast, I discuss the daddy-daughter relationships with other girl dads like myself on there. And sometimes we even have daughters on. So make sure that you guys go check that out on our YouTube channel, as well as your podcast listening platforms. Make sure you guys go and check that out. And also, we want to talk about if you ever decided, or if you ever thought about having a podcast of your own, make sure you guys go to the eBooks by E. James website, our eBooks by E. James website, and get your copy of the Start Your Podcast Now ebook. This ebook I wrote because so many people was asking me about how to start a podcast. And so I wrote this ebook. Not only did I write it, but I actually turned it into a workshop that I'm now doing at high schools and grammar schools, teaching the kids how to start their own podcast, as well as learning life skills that come along with podcasting. So if you ever thought about starting your own podcast, make sure you guys go there to the eBooks by E. James podcast, the eBooks by ejames.com, in order to get your copy of the Start Your Podcast Now ebook. Also, our product of the week. As you guys know, we are a self-sustained podcast, and one of the ways that we stay on the air is by bringing you amazing products for you to purchase in order to help us pay our bills. And so, our product of the week is our purpose journal, as well as our purpose planner, because I believe that we should journal in order to keep track of the things that we've been through in our lives and where we are, and also plan for our future. So our podcast, our purpose journal and purpose planner is is our product. A lot of P's today, right? It's our product of the week. The descriptions is definitely down below in the descriptions of the episode, if it's on YouTube or if it's on your podcast listening platforms. The links to the Amazons where you can find those at is in the description. So make sure that you check that out. So we're gonna jump right in today, just like any other day. We are blessed with the guest, Mr. David. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
No problem, no problem. First of all, let me say thank you for being on, because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you are here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. So we're going to jump right in. So do me a favor, David, introduce yourself to my listeners. Tell us a little bit of who you are and what it is that you do.
So my name is David Allen Tracy, and I am a personal brand coach, a motivational speaker, and a serial entrepreneur. I've owned different businesses, including an international marketing agency. And now in the realm of personal branding, it is all about helping people discover their identity, operate within their authentic self, and shine for the world to see. So really, that is something I do on a very practical level with people, from helping them discover their personality, how to present themselves properly on social media and on different platforms and on stage, and if they want to write a book, just different things. It's all about personal branding, marketing themselves effectively. And as a motivational speaker, I speak on topics of identity, worth, authenticity, destiny. And really, in all of this, what was drawing to me to your podcast was the fact of healing, deal to heal. I, as a personal brand coach, am certified in a modality of inner healing called theta healing, where I help people overcome trauma from childhood that gets in the way from them being their authentic self and being able to really just be authentic. I think so many people project what they think other people want them to be, and they're operating in fear of man, and they're operating all these different things. So that's in a nutshell a lot of what I do. I've worked with over 450 plus clients in the last 4 years, providing coaching and consulting. And I absolutely love what I get to do. And I love getting to be on podcast and meet people like you, Ernest, and just share stories and insights.
All right. We're definitely going to dive a little deeper into the healing space and some of the things that you do. But I always say it. I am a speaker myself, so I know that there's always a story before the story, right? So before you started doing this work, there usually is some kind of major event or something happens in our lives that we kind of make it through, that we get over, and then decide from that event, now we're going to spend our life, motivating and inspiring others who may be going through the same thing or, facing similar challenges. So who was David before, right? Who was David before, and what was that major event or challenge in your life that you overcame that kind of was a turning point into push you into the work that you do now?
No, it's a great question, and that you're absolutely right. Anyone who speaks about trauma and healing trauma has been through it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And every single human being on the planet has experienced trauma in some shape or form. And there is not one type of trauma we can say is more severe or less severe.
Yeah.
Everybody's trauma is trauma for them, and everybody is deserving of healing. And so for me, I was born in Wisconsin. My parents were and still are missionaries. And I grew up in Panama, actually, in Central America, amongst indigenous tribes. And that formed a lot of who I am. Growing up in Latin America, I'm fully bilingual. I've traveled to over 40 countries doing international nonprofit work. And it was really a huge part of my life. I always tell people that God is at the center of my life. It is the reason I live and breathe everything. And yet, how often as children do we have things that happen to us that get in the way and sabotage
Take it with you.
our ability to thrive, to be who we're supposed to be. And in my case, the trauma that hit me at a pretty young age was sexual abuse. I was sexually abused a few times, several times actually, and it should have never happened. It should never happen to kids. It should never happen to anybody. But when you're young like that, you blame yourself, you keep it contained, you don't tell anybody, and it's this secret. We should tell our parents, we should seek help, but as kids, we tend to keep it bottled up and contained. And so I contained it most of my life. I didn't tell anybody about it until I was 19. And that led to a series of habits and behaviors in my life that were coping mechanisms. Namely, one of the biggest ones was that I didn't know how to be still and be with myself. I didn't know how to do that. So I kept busy all the time, always doing things, always being busy, always working hard, keeping multitasking, doing good for others, doing nonprofit work. I directed a nonprofit of my own for 5 years, and really just found myself getting extremely sick from overworking myself to the level where I was hospitalized numerous times from overworking. I actually got sick with cancer when I was 14, went through chemotherapy, was really sick for several years in my adolescence. And all of that kind of combined with the earlier sexual abuse really put some situations in my life where in a way, I didn't confront a lot of things until I was an adult, until I was actually married and had kids. And even then I kept stuffing it down. You know, I know you're a girl dad. I have 4 daughters, and so I only have 4 daughters, so no boys. So I'm all about that. And but I was in full-time nonprofit work and ministry, and then I ended up having cancer again when I was 30. So it's the second time at this point I've had cancer, unrelated to the first one. And this time it was more severe in the sense of that I had children. I was married. You know, I have responsibilities, people to care for, and I don't want to leave my wife a widow and my kids orphaned from me. And so I remember being in the shower and crying out to God, like, help me. What am I going to do here? You know, how am I going to overcome this? And I had a very distinct sense that God was speaking to me, do not accept this. This is not my will for you. Don't accept this. And I was like, okay. I wasn't ready to hear that. And so I didn't. And I got people all around the world praying for me. And that's a long story. And that's not the main point of this podcast episode today. But I will say that I had a miraculous healing. That was proven at Mayo Clinic that I had cancer. And then I was miraculously healed from the malignant cancer. They said it's gone. Like, we don't know what happened. We don't know how to explain it. Like, you had it, now you don't. So that was really significant for me, to which I was very thankful for. But in that situation, I had this transition happen to where I was like, all right, I have this new lease on life. Now what? And so I had these business ideas that I've had for many years that I wanted to do to make a difference in the world. But I started my businesses out, and I still carried a lot of that trauma from childhood. And I worked myself, and I worked myself, and I worked myself, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked. And eventually I just had the same patterns happening and started getting sick. My body started shutting down. My nervous system started shutting down. And I didn't know what to do anymore. And I met a client of mine who really was an amazing thing to happen, because I help all these clients from numerous industries, but this person specifically helped people overcome trauma. And that's what she was all about. And so as I was doing marketing for her and coming alongside of her, I began to learn and glean from some of the stuff she was doing. And she began to work with me. Next thing you know, she's doing inner healing sessions with me, and I was starting to experience incredible breakthroughs for the first time in my life in certain areas where I wasn't experiencing breakthroughs, and from from the childhood trauma and entire patterns were being broken in my life that I was carrying into my current days. I was like, I'm over that thread has been pulled now. To the level to where I was like, I want to incorporate this into my work. So at that point, after doing that for about 6 months, I transitioned my marketing agency over some time, took about 2 years, where we were only a digital marketing agency, to where I became a personal brand coach. And then I became a certified theta healer practitioner. So I could incorporate helping people market themselves while also going introspective and saying, let's talk about that trauma, that fear of man, the whatever it is that they're dealing with, so that they can be more effective. Because if people are carrying trauma, which so many of us do, and we're not healing it, it gets in the way of everything else. It's so hard. We might be fine for a few days, but then we're triggered and it gets in the way. So it had to be an element of what I include. So on my website, a lot of people kind of see the Swiss Army knife I have on there. And I say that depending on the tool that we need today, do we need to go personal? Do we need to talk about healing? Do we need to go on to your marketing? Do we need to talk about, public relations? Whatever it is, we're going to pull out that tool today. But almost all of my clients, we go there. We go to that personal level, and it doesn't have to be long term. Sometimes it's only a few sessions that we'll have, 1 to 4 sessions to start with, and then we get into the practical. But I can say that so many people have seen breakthrough. So many people. I've had clients who come to me and they think they're going to go this direction, but after getting healed from trauma, they suddenly go, why was I going that route? That was a pattern of trauma. I'm going this route now. Or they're like the backup singer and never thinking they could be the lead singer. And all of a sudden, after dealing with trauma, they're like, I'm ready to be the lead singer now, or whatever the situation is. So that is really what I'm all about. And, people don't like talking about trauma a lot unless you've been through it and been healed from it. Then you're like, I love talking about it. Let's go there, right? You have a whole podcast about this. So it's like, I'm all about it. And it gets to the point where it's almost like I look forward to the next way I'll be healed, the next level I'll be healed, and navigating people through that as well, where they get to see the breakthroughs.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, David, because it kind of makes me think about, it's like the question of who heals the healer. You know what I mean? And especially as speakers, generally we're the one that everyone comes to. With the issues, whatever problems that they have, we're the ones that they come to for some kind of solution. But then it's like, okay, so where do we go? You know what I mean? And right. So I love that you even do that work with your clients, or whoever you do it with, because I definitely think as speakers, that's definitely something that we could use too, because again, we're pouring out constantly and constantly trying to find the solutions to everyone else's problems to help them work through their problems. And sometimes we don't get to work through, some of the things that we're dealing with, or like you said, we get so busy where we're pushing it aside. And there's this example that I usually give. I don't think I've ever given it here, but when I used to do my talks with the fatherless daughters, which is kind of how I started this whole thing. Long story. Anyway, so I used to work with fatherless daughters, and I would tell them that the issues that they have, I don't like to call them daddy issues, but the issues that they're dealing with is kind of like a glass. If you have a glass and you pour cooking oil, just a little bit of cooking oil on the bottom of it, and that's your trauma. And then you take another glass of water, and this will be your water. Your water will be your life. That will be your happiness. That will be everything that comes with, what makes you happy, what gives you joy. And you start pouring it in that same cup. For a while, as you're filling up with your happiness, it seems like it's happiness all over. But sooner or later, that oil is going to rise to the top. You know what I mean? And so once it hits the top, those oils what represents the issues. Once it reaches the top, now you got to deal with it, or else it's going to start to destroy everything else that's under it, which is everything that makes you happy. So your family, your relationships, your job, your personal worth. If you don't deal with these issues, sooner or later, it's going to start affecting everything else that makes you happy. And so we definitely have to deal with those things. And that's just a scenario that I usually give to kind of help people to understand it. But again, I'm glad that you do that work. And also, I want to go back to something that you said earlier, and say thank you for sharing, right? And that's the part of being abused, right? Being sexually abused, because I know as men, that's something that we hold up. Generally, people in general hold it in, right? Even the ladies hold it in. But as men, we really hold it in. It's like, okay, we can't tell anybody. And I love having the conversations with people like yourself, where it's like, hey, I'm going to say it because I know we're dealing with it. And I always say that's why I'm open about my divorce and depression and suicide ideations and everything else that I've dealt with, because I know I'm not the only one. And so I always congratulate, men that come on and are able to stand in that truth and admit that, because it opens up the door for the rest of us. It opens up the door for other men who may have been dealing with the same thing, or even not the same thing, maybe just something else that they're hiding behind, something else that they're scared to stand in that truth about. When we start having the conversations, it just opens up the doors, and so I'm very glad, and I thank you again for, having the bravery to stand up and stand up in that truth and admit it. I want to go back to a little bit about one of the other things that you said, with working with the and I said I'm going to try to pronounce it right, but working in the area of healing that you work with. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I'm interested in it for myself, but I think that it may be a new term, or it may be new to some of my listeners as well as myself. So tell us a little bit more about that healing process and how that works, just so we have an understanding of what that is.
Yeah, so when we talk about theta healing, we're talking about the theta brainwave. So we all have brainwaves. There's beta, alpha, theta, etc. There's different ones, and the theta brainwave is a state of mind where your brain is in essentially when you're waking up from sleep, and you're aware that you're falling asleep, that you're aware that you're waking up, but you're also aware that you're asleep, and you can kind of drift between dream and reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's theta. The other theta brainwave state is when we're about to fall asleep, and we're going out, we're kind of awake, we're lucid, we're there, but we're not. And we can still kind of control our thoughts and so forth, but we're also drifting into that dream and sleep mode. We can also have the theta brainwave when we're looking and out at the ocean for hours or whatever, and just your thoughts drift. Or you're on a long road trip by yourself and you got the radio on and you don't even remember how you got home. Like just zoning it out, that zoned out space. Well, there's a lot that happens in that zoned out space in the background. So we have our conscious mind, we have our subconscious mind. As you and I are here talking right now, my conscious mind is speaking to you right now. But in the back of my mind, when I said sitting out by the ocean, my brain is picturing the ocean and the waves, and the last time I was at the beach, what that was like, and I want to go on vacation again. Our brain is doing all these different things, and then there's thousands of little triggers and memories that are happening. Childhood stuff and grandpa and grandma, and my great grandma lived in Florida, and we would visit her, and all these things happening simultaneously. And so when you're in that theta brainwave state, the subconscious mind, the stuff that's in the background, actually comes to the forefront. Now, why is this relevant? When you're guided, and so I just want to make a couple clarifying things. This is not hypnosis, nothing like that. But I will sit with someone for 90 minutes. And during that 90 minutes, about 70 minutes of that time, an hour and 10 minutes, their eyes are closed. They're either laying down or sitting up, wherever they're going to be the most comfortable. And they're in a very sedated, meditative, calm, relaxed state. And what I'm essentially wanting them to do is I'm asking them a series of questions, usually 50 to 100 questions in that 80-minute period, 90-minute period. And the questions are not meant to be answered with a well thought out response. I'm not wanting the conscious mind's response. I want the back stuff to come out. So when I ask a question and I say, tell me about your childhood, I'm not wanting the full story of your childhood. I want whatever pops in their head first. And it might be a memory. It might be an image of like a playground. It might be a smell that they remember. It might be whatever it is. But I want it to be the first thing that comes to the mind, almost as if it's at the tip of the tongue. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if it makes no sense. It doesn't matter if it's irrelevant to them. It could be a cartoon. It could be anything, a song. Where it's really going ping pong, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I'm asking questions, they're answering while remaining in that state. And what happens is when we let go of the steering wheel, right, per se, we let go of the conscious mind, we let go of the steering wheel of control. So when it comes to the reason that's relevant is that whenever there's trauma, we enter into a cycle of shame, fear, and control. The trauma triggers shame. The first thing we do when we feel ashamed is we want to hide, because we don't ever want to feel that way again. We cover ourselves up by controlling in some shape or form, usually in the form of a coping mechanism, denial, inferiority, superiority, you name it. But there's different ways we do that. So what happens is when we want to talk about trauma, it's always that controlling mechanism, the conscious mind that gets in the way. Whereas the subconscious mind remembers all of it. I don't remember a lot of the details about the first time I was sexually abused. I remember the later ones. The first time, I don't remember. Why? Because I stuffed it away. Early on, I did not want to remember it. I didn't want to think about it. I found a coping mechanism to not remember the details. It was too painful. So what happens is when we go into that theta brainwave state, as I'm asking questions, I'm asking questions, and we've kind of followed the cookie crumbs, essentially, the breadcrumbs, until we can get to the source. And when we find the source, usually it's that the earliest memory. The idea is if we can pull the thread or change that pattern, then all the other patterns will change as a consequence of that. Usually there will be some imagery that will be worked in as well in the memory. Sometimes I've had situations where people, especially if there's a predator involved or something that was very severe or abusive, physical, verbal, whatever it would be, to go back to that memory can be very, very complicated. Mm-hmm. So I'll sometimes be asked, like, okay, is there someone in your childhood that you trust beyond measure, that you knew you were safe with, that you always knew that you would never come to harm if they were with you, and that you felt protected? And they'll say whoever that is. And all right, I want you to picture that person with you right now. They're standing with you. They're holding your hand. They're not going to leave you alone. Now I want you to go, and there's this visual guidance, mm-hmm. And then there will be different type of symbolism. And this takes time. It's hard to explain because it's very different with each person, but it's highly visual, because when you're in that theta brainwave state, the visual component is very real. Yeah. And so we're able to essentially shift things and create patterns and replace memories with we're not changing the memory. No, it happened, but we're adding components into it that serve as markers for what is true. Because oftentimes when we have trauma, we tend to adopt a belief system that is a false or counterfeit reality of what is true. And that becomes a belief that we believe in, and it becomes a behavior. And so if we can change wherever the lie is and replace it with a truth, then the behaviors will change. So you're triggered, something happens. So if it's verbal abuse, as an example, someone in your boss kind of has a bad day and yells at you, and it triggers you badly because maybe your dad was verbally abusive. But you suddenly, because of the theta healing work, it doesn't faze you as much because you were healed from that. And also you have this tool now in your toolbox that you can bring up. Now, that's a lot of the technical side of it. There's a spiritual side to it as well. And depending on the person, I'm someone who, I love God, I believe in God. So,
Mhm.
I will interweave prayer into it, and,
Yeah.
and all the things depending on the person's comfort level. But it really is individually, it is individual, case by case. And what I love about it is that it is such a creative process. When we heal with people, when people get healed from trauma, it can be so creative because the brain is creative. We are created to be creative.
Mhm.
And yet trauma keeps us trapped. And so when we start to get unleashed from trauma, we can actually begin to be creative again, to be as we were created to be, and operate in a totally different way. And so oftentimes as we're pulling threads and we're changing, it's like the brain just opens up more and more and more, and it becomes really fun for my clients. They actually really enjoy coming to the sessions. It's not traumatic
Mhm.
anymore. So that's a little bit of it. It's not talk therapy. It's a guided meditation is the best way I could
Yeah,
probably put
yeah.
it. So
Yeah, and I love it because even as you're explaining it, like my mind is like going through the process as you were just explaining it. And it's even like you mentioned about um the water, and the first thing I thought about was the beach, right? Because you like in the back of your head. I was at the beach earlier today, so that was the first thing that came, is like, the beach and everything. So yeah, I definitely I can imagine and connect with it, even in your explaining it. So I'm sure with as someone that's going through the whole thing, is it just be amazing. Even though I want to say this, because you mentioned a lot about childhood trauma, and I really think that there's a part of it that affects us. Well, I think all of it affects us so much as adults, right? Especially when we don't confront it. And a lot of times we don't confront it because, like you mentioned, one of our first things is, shame and fear, but I think sometimes that fear of being misunderstood, and not just the traumas of our childhood, but even some of the traumas and things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so when you're talking to someone who's kind of having a problem with fear, what are some of the things you may even talk to them about or work with them about to kind of overcoming, your own fears that you're dealing with? Because I think fear is like one of the biggest um, weapons that life uses against us. It's like there's so much opportunity, and fear is so strong that not only does it affects you in the things that you don't want to happen, it even gives you fear about things you want to happen, right? So we talk about the fear of success, and like even myself on this journey that I'm on now with the podcast, and even with my speaking, things are really opening up. And while I don't believe I have a fear of success, there still is a maybe a little anxiety of the not knowing. You know what I mean? So probably even some fear of success. It's like, yes, I want success, but then because the level of success that I'm working toward, I've never been on. So there's even a fear of that new place. You know what I mean? So when you're working with somebody that's even, again, dealing with any kind of fear, what are some of the things that you may kind of talk to them about or help them to even overcome the fear that they're facing?
so there's so many different types of fear, and we all know this, but probably the biggest fear is the fear of the unknown. If we can,
Mhm.
and so in a way, fear of success is the fear of the unknown, or
Yeah.
fear of responsibility is the fear of the unknown. Can I handle this? Can I deal with this? Can I do this? Because the unknown scares us. It's
Mhm.
oftentimes when we have a health issue, for example, and we're having symptoms, we don't know what it is, we're more fearful than when we're told what it is. Because once we know, then information gives us the power we need, in a sense, to know where to go, to know what
Mhm.
steps to take. So the biggest thing with fear is that there's a couple of things. Number one, it is to know the more information we have, the more calm and relaxed we feel. And that can be in different ways. So if it's fear of rejection, for example, and I'm afraid of being rejected. That's usually a childhood trigger, most often. And yet, when I say information, what can change that fear? What can change that fear is love. Perfect love casts out fear. So if that's the case, then what do these people need to experience who are feeling fear of rejection? Is they need to experience love and acceptance. Well, what if they can't experience that because they don't know how? Where do we go? They don't know how because they've never experienced it in childhood. Then how are they going to experience it? How do they even know how to identify it? Well, then it has to be demonstrated to them. That might be for me, it may be God, it may be whatever it is, but they need to experience it for themselves. So it's information, it's experience, it's both of those things. So the more we're exposed to something the positive way, the less we're afraid of the negative side of it. So it's kind of like when we first start working out. We are scared of, we walk into the gym, we see all these men and women, they're super buff and they're doing all these, lifting all these weights, and we're like, this is not me. What am I doing here? I'm out. Like, I'm already worn out within 5 minutes. I want to go to the bathroom and hurl. I'm not feeling good. And we're afraid. We're afraid because we don't know how to use the equipment. We don't know how to, we're intimidated. But then we hire a coach, and that coach comes in, or we have a friend who's nice to us, and they say, all right, let me take baby steps with you. Here, this is how we use this equipment. And they're with us. They're walking alongside of us in a way. They're showing us love. Okay. They're showing us relationship, and they're guiding us in. And you know what, bit by bit, we start doing the nickels and the dimes and the quarters, and we start to, the more weights. And next thing you know, we're starting to get the body that some of these other ones that intimidated us had, and we're not afraid anymore. We're not afraid, and we're not intimidated by it anymore. So every time we're encountered with something new, every time we face a new challenge, whether that be getting married or having children, or they're going to graduate, you're going to be empty nester, or a new career, or new degree track, or a new hobby you're going to try, there's always a component of fear, which is the unknown. So how do we remedy it? Get information, learn as much as you can. The more information you have, that's power. Secondly, find people who can mentor you, walk alongside of you, guide you in it so you aren't afraid. And thirdly, if it's a severe enough fear that's getting in the way and it's unsubstantiated, it may be rooted in trauma from an early childhood trauma. In that case, get help to heal that, and the rest will follow in suit. That's essentially the way I would deal with fear. And you know what? Fear is always looks different when you go through it, right? You go through it, you look the other side, you go, why is I afraid of that?
Right. And like you said, a pure love casts out all fear. And I think love definitely is the answer to all life's problems, right?
Exactly.
I think we started in love. If you go back to the beginning, depending on your faith, what you believe, I believe in God definitely, and the Bible. And if we go back to the beginning, we were created in love. He said, "Let us create man in our image," and so we were made in love. And it was the sin that separated us and
100%.
brought on fear, right? Because one of the first things in the garden, when God came into the garden, one of the first emotions that they talked about was fear, because they was like, "Oh, let us hide because we're naked," long story short. But so I think getting back to that pure love, the love that we have for each other. And I remember someone even growing up talking about the 10 Commandments, and it said if you go through the 10 Commandments, the majority of the 10 Commandments is not your relationship with God, it's about your relationship with others. And so that's an important piece, because so many times, and this is not going to turn into a Bible study, but so many times we think about our relationship with God while at that same time neglecting our relationship with others, when even in the simplest form with the 10 Commandments, it was mostly about how you relate to others, so how you relate to others, how you treat, the other people around you, is somewhat as a reflection of how God treats us, and so definitely I believe that love is that thing that's missing in today.
Well, the 10 Commandments are logical, loving limits that God has set in place for us to protect us so that we don't have to be afraid. And when people break the 10 Commandments, that actually instills fear in society, because the logical, loving limit has been broken, and thereby it creates chaos. So we actually have fear in our world because of sin, as you mentioned, but these 10 commandments are broken. Thereby, the logical living limit that God put in place for our well-being and protection is now severed, and thereby fear goes everywhere.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely agree. Definitely agree. So before we get out of here, Dave, I got one more thing. I know that as a speaker, you talk to um, people and motivation and everything as well as myself. But one of the things I know that you speak about is not only dealing with the things of your past, but how do you live a life where you're leaving a mark on the people that you come in contact with, right? Leaving a mark, making an impact on your social circles, impact on your loved ones, your family, and those people that's within your reach, right? And then even sometimes when we talk about podcasting and social media nowadays, even people that you'll never see, you know what I mean? When we're doing these podcasts and putting out these messages, we're touching people that we may never meet. You know what I mean? Some people that we may never actually come in contact with. So when we're talking about, becoming or creating that life that just leaves a remarkable imprint on the loved ones and those that we come in contact with, I think that is an amazing thing. So I want you to leave us with just talk a little bit about that, not only in leaving a mark in your social circles, but even leaving a mark in the workplace, in the industry, and where you work and where you live. So when you're talking to others, about that, just the leaving a life legacy, what are some of the things that you kind of uh, uh, encourage them to work out in their lives so that they can do that?
Well, every single human being is created in God's image and likeness, as you well said earlier. But not everybody knows that. And not everybody wants to think about that, because with that comes this sense of, if you know that you're created in God's image and likeness, then why were you created? There was a purpose. Every single person has a purpose on this earth. So many people don't discover what that purpose is. And we tend to waste time, a lot of time, on things that don't matter or that are irrelevant, or we miss the mark. And so many people float. They float through and they do this and they do the other, and they go home and they watch TV and they just sit and they lounge, and nothing wrong with that per se, but we were meant to live a life of legacy and purpose. I think generations before us had more of this mindset, but nowadays, with the buffet society that we live in, where everything is within reach, everything's at my fingertips that I want to distract me today, from the apps on my phone to the TV in front of me to the things I can buy, and the sheer variety of restaurants I can eat at. Entertainment is king to distract me from living my purpose-driven life. And so it's also the number one coping mechanism for trauma, by the way, that most people don't want to deal with trauma, then distract yourself, right? So, but how many of us don't count our days? That we really, really don't have that many days to live on this earth. I think if I live to be 95, I'll have lived, over 34,675 days. That's it. I've only lived about 13,500 days so far of my life. Each day counts. And if we were to think about this today, whatever age you are, and if you're watching, you're listening, I want you to go on Google and put what year it would be if you died at age 95. Okay. If you died at age 95, what year would it be for you? I think for me, it was year 2081. And we think about that. No one wants to think about that, right? Because we don't want to think about dying or, getting old. But if we don't think that way, we're going to waste time. We have a short window in this earth, in this life. I'm not talking eternity, I'm talking this world, this life, to do what we were created to do. And everything around us distracts us from being mission true to that, to accomplishing that goal. And that goal is to know God. That goal is to then live as God has equipped you to be, and to be in every way, to love your neighbor, to love God, to love your neighbor. It's going to look different for each person, because how God has equipped you is completely different. The tools and the skill sets you have are completely different from someone else. There is no one else like you, Ernest, in the whole world, and no one ever has been like you. No one ever will be like you. You are unique. So there are unique facets to who you are that if you hold back, if you allow trauma or anything else to hold back, then there's some wasted potential there, and you're not doing that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that in a general sense. But everybody, that's my main thing. Now, I will be in different stages. It ultimately comes down to I have 6 keynotes I give, and one is called The Art of Personal Branding. The other is Embracing Your Authentic Self. I have one about turning traumas into triumphs, and a few others along those lines. And basically, all of it's interconnected. It's about identity, knowing yourself, going upward, inward, then outward. That's the order it has to be, always upward, inward, outward. We are not going to find the answers within. Sorry, we're not going to find the answers externally. It has to go upward first, then we go inward, then we go externally. And so if we do that, man, the potential that we have is unlimited. We can accomplish so much. And so that's really, at the end of the day, what I speak about. It is about motivating people to discover who they are, to shed light on who they are so that they can shine for the world.
I love it. I love it. David, I wanna first of all thank you for coming on. Definitely enjoyed this conversation. I want you to leave us with a word of advice, word of inspiration, or something like that. However you feel to end this with, and also to share your social media handles and where we can find you for my listeners in case they want to work with you and learn more about you, first of all, and also maybe work with you to even to heal some of that inner healing that they need. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. For my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure that you guys are checking us out at our websites, right? We want to make sure you guys check out our ebook website, which is ebooksbyejames.com. On their website, you can find several of the ebooks that I wrote, including the Core 4, which is the basics of the podcast, the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. We talk a lot about the Core 4, which is the Core 4 values that every daughter should get from her father. So make sure you guys just go to the ebooksbyejames.com in order to check that out, as well as some of the other ebooks that we have, including the Start Your Podcast Now ebook. For those of you who are thinking about starting your own podcast, that ebook is also there. Also, make sure you check us out at our Deal to Heal tees. Our Deal to Heal tees is our inspirational t-shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline, as well as not only as our inspirational tees there, but there also are our podcast merch, and that includes our t-shirts with our logo from the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as the Girl Dad Discussions podcast also there. And we talked about the other ebooks. Last but not least, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops every other month. We used to do them every quarter, but now we started to do them every other month, should I say. And we talk about everything surrounding forgiveness, what it means to forgive, what it means to who it forgives, what forgiveness is for, and just everything around forgiveness. And it's a free virtual workshop. It don't cost you anything. And you can sign up to be able to take it online or on your phone or on your laptop, on the go, wherever you are. Again, it's every other month, completely free. So go to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for that, or just go to Eventbrite to register for the forgiveness workshop held by the Forgiveness Mission. So make sure you guys go and check that out. So David, again, I want to thank you so very much for being my guest and sharing your story and your expertise. I really appreciate it. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I would say that the last word I'll say is, if you can't answer the following questions: who are you? Number one, who are you? What is your purpose? And what are you going to leave behind? Then those are 3 very big pillars that you need to know, or else you're going to be deviating majorly in life. You're not going to be on the path you need to be. So important to know those three. And if you're confused or you're wondering, I don't know, any of that stuff, and you need some coaching, I'm happy to have an initial consultation with you for free. So the first 30 minutes is free, and then we can go into a package. I'm really easy to work with. Love to meet you. 30 minutes, no commitment, no strings attached. Call. My website is davidallentracy.com. My Instagram is davidallentracy.com, and everything else that I'm on is David Allen Tracy. So, just check me out and don't be shy. And I'd love to meet you. So yeah, thank you, Ernest.
All right, no problem. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. So until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.